Okay, which tie? Kim asked, holding the black tie up with one hand and a green tie in the other, and made eye contact with Markov in the bathroom mirror. The tiny floating robot hummed. My research says that Chief Raincompre has a 73% chance of preferring a plain black tie as opposed to bright colours. Or maybe I should just ask Max, Kim suggested with a smile, and Markov's eyes turned into little triangles to indicate happiness. There is a 100% chance that Max would know best. With a smile, Kim left the penthouse's bathroom and entered the spacious kitchen. It was technically Max's home, not his, but with the money he earned as chief operating officer at his mum's company, Ada, and the decorations reflected that. A lot of the walls had been painted dusky colours, and even the tiles in the kitchen were a dark grey, but it was well lit, and the way the light bounced off the silver appliances made the rooms of the apartment seem brighter than they should have been, and plenty of daylight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, which gave amazing views of Montmartre. Max was sat at the breakfast bar, the smoothie bowl Kim had made for him already empty, and now he was furiously typing on the tablet that Ada sold. "Have you seen Markov?" Max asked without stopping his work. "He's flossing his teeth." Max looked up at him then. "He does not have..." "Very funny. He's helping me pick a tie." Kim held them back up. "Which one do you think would look more professional to Officer Raincompre? I mean, Chief Raincompre." When they'd still been at school, Roger had just been a regular police officer, but he'd worked his way up, and had only become the Chief of Paris Police because the last one had been murdered, although that case had yet to be solved. Max slid off the leather bar stool and went over to Kim. "No tie," he said, then reached up and unbuttoned the top two buttons of Kim's shirt. "Like this." Then he gripped the collar of Kim's shirt and pulled him down so they could kiss. Kim let the ties he was holding fall to the floor, and placed his hands on Max's waist, bringing his boyfriend closer to him so he could deepen the kiss, but he pulled away when he felt Max fiddling with the next button on his shirt. "I have to go to work," Max sighed. "Are you sure you are ready? There is a 5% chance you are not, and..." "Max," Kim said, taking one of his hands in his. "I'll be fine." But he did understand his boyfriend's worry. Kim hadn't always wanted to be a police officer. He had dreams of becoming an athlete, but a bad knee injury had put an end to that. He was all healed now, but he'd never be able to run or swim like he'd once used to. But after plenty of rehabilitation, he was cleared to train as a police officer. But of course, with the help of Max and Markov, he'd aced the fast-track course for detective, and today was his first day as detective constable. And actually, the first day being a police officer of any kind. Max squeezed his hand. "Please call me if anything happens." "You know I will." With a nod, Max let go of Kim's hand and slumped against the counter. Then he took off his glasses so he could rub the bridge of his nose. Kim knew his boyfriend well enough to know he only did that when he was stressed. And if Kim was being honest, his boyfriend had been despondent for the past few weeks now. "Hey, what's wrong?" "Just..." he sighed. "I have a lot of work to do. Tonight is the gala for Ada, and you are going back to work." "Okay, well, other people are helping organise the gala, and I'll be there with you tonight, and as for me, I told you not to worry. It's my first day. They're not going to have me, God, I don't know, negotiate with the Court of Butterflies." Tears welled up in Max's eyes, and Kim's eyebrows shot up in surprise. In the entire time Kim had known Max, his boyfriend had very seldom cried. But what if they do? They won't, baby. They'd never let a rookie detective talk with the gang running the city, although Kim wasn't sure if gang was the right word for them. They were more like a crime syndicate at this point. "You can just stay here," Max protested. "You do not need to work. I make enough money." "I know," Kim said, and that had been the reason he'd moved in. After his injury had confirmed he would no longer be the star athlete he'd meant to be, he'd lost all of his sponsorships, which meant he'd lost his ability to pay rent, bills, and for food. As soon as he told Max, his high school best friend hadn't hesitated in inviting him to move in so he could recover without the worry of money. And while Kim had been devastated at the time, he was glad it had happened, because his moving in was the final push for the two men to finally admit how they felt about each other. "But I'm bored. I want to be useful." "Then work at Ada," the smaller man exclaimed. "You know I'm bad with computers," Kim said, as he gently wiped away the tears that had already fallen on Max's cheeks. "Are you really sure this is all you're stressed about? I'll probably just be sitting behind a desk all day, and the gala is the gala. You have one every year. You don't need to cry, baby." Max sniffed and wiped away the rest of his tears himself. "Yes, that's all." Kim frowned. He didn't quite believe Max, but he wasn't going to push this right now. "Well, you just focus on the gala. There's no need to worry about me." Markov flew into the room then. Kim, you must leave now if you want to have a 100% chance of arriving at work on time, the robot chirped. Thanks, Markov. And if you do get worried about me, Kim said, you know Markov can track my phone for you. Max nodded. Yeah, I will see you later. Come straight to my office. I am taking our suits for tonight with me this morning. Kim grabbed his phone and wallet from where he'd left them on the breakfast bar earlier. I will. I'll ring you on my lunch break. After one more kiss, Kim was out of the door, and once he'd made it down to street level, he took the metro over to Gare de l'Est, and walked the rest of the way to Paris's central police station. This area's proximity to the police station hadn't lessened the crime rate here, though. It was early enough that not many people were around, and the ones who were either leaving the metro to finish their commute to work on foot, or were entering the station to get there. Everyone was keeping to themselves, though, nibbling on croissants from inside paper bags that had turned translucent from the grease of the buttery pastry, and none of them seemed to notice the blood that had gathered in the gutter of the road, and the other congealed body innards settling in it. Kim turned away from it and hurried to the police station. He'd get help as soon as he got there. The station was on the corner, and like most buildings in Paris, was very old. It was 3 floors, with the ground floor made out of a dark grey brick, and the rest in a cream. Or rather, that's what it used to look like. Now the bricks that had been cream were turning grey from all the pollution, and the grey ones were turning black. The amount of money needed to tackle crime in the city had waved goodbye to any environmental initiatives the city had once been the purveyor of. Even the French flag that waved around the atop the mansard-style roof was looking threadbare and decayed. There was a lot of work to be done, and while this job hadn't been his first choice, Kim was determined to try and make a difference. Kim! He looked around and smiled when he saw Sabrina. He hadn't seen her since the Ada Gala the previous year, but he immediately welcomed her in a hug. She hadn't grown any taller since they'd been in high school, but she dressed better now, wearing a pretty blue summer dress, and she'd grown out her hair. It was sat over her left shoulder in a neat braid, her full fringe and familiar headband nowhere to be seen. Hey Sabrina, my dad mentioned last night at dinner that you'd be shadowing him today, she said as she pulled away. Oh, so you came all the way here just to see me? Kim said with a smirk. Very funny. At least you fixed your hair. Kim tutted but paid it no mind. Sabrina was right. He still wore his hair in a quiff, but it was more toned down than what he'd worn in school. That had been less of a quiff and more like a slide made out of hair. Could you give my dad his lunch, please? He left without it this morning, and I've got to get to the hotel as soon as possible. Chloe and I will be at the gala tonight, so we have some new bar staff coming in to help just for today, and we need to teach them the ropes. And by we, you mean... I mean me, Sabrina admitted, but to be fair to Chloe, she's adding them to the payroll while I do that. Kim couldn't help but laugh. It was hard to believe that Chloe even knew how to do that. Sabrina opened the cream tote bag on her shoulder and took out a plastic box, which she handed to Kim. Thanks for this. I'll see you tonight. And then she was gone. Kim turned back to the station and steeled himself. It was today or never. He walked over the threshold and immediately started coughing. He knew the stereotype that French police officers smoked a lot, but this smell was excessive. The station was larger than the outside had made it seem, and behind the front desk, caged off with what Kim hoped was bulletproof glass, was the bullpen. You could only just hear the chatter and ringing of phones behind it, the glass muffling most of it, but the rest was being drowned out by a woman who was sitting in the waiting room on the side Kim was standing on, wailing. It was hard to listen to. He stepped up to the front desk and smiled at the desk sergeant, who just blew cigarette smoke into his face. What do you want, he said, not bothering to take the cigarette out of his mouth. My name is Li Shen Kim. Today is my first day as detective constable. The man glanced over at the computer on the desk and nodded. Yeah, welcome. You picked the worst job. Kim gave him a nervous smile. Speaking of, on the next street over, I saw a pool of blood with other... body matter? The man's bored facial expression didn't change. Did anyone call it in? I don't think so. Maybe they did. Kim didn't know. He'd only just got here. Then it's none of our business. The desk sergeant grabbed one of the ID passes that was sat on the table. Use this to get in and out of the bullpen. Your security clearance can be updated later. Chief's office is the one at the back. He turned around and pointed through the scuffed glass, and past all the desks and up a set of wooden stairs was a single enclosed office, and Kim could just about make out the stout ginger man inside. Got it. Thanks. Kim grabbed the ID and made his way over to the door that marked the entrance to the bullpen, but the wailing woman sprung up then and grabbed his hand. "Let me come with you," she shouted. "I need to see D.I. Dubois. My daughter went missing 3 days ago. She's only 6. She trailed off into more sobbing, and the desk sergeant finally looked more animated. "Oi, hands off!" "It's all right," Kim said, and he carefully escorted the woman back to the waiting area and sat her down in one of the plastic blue chairs. "What's your daughter's name?" "Aurora Boreal," the lady said with a sniff. Then she took out her phone, and the wallpaper was of a blonde girl. "This is her. I'll find D.I. Dubois and ask them to give you an update." "Thank you," she said with a watery smile, and Kim went back over to the door, swiped the ID card, and finally went into the bullpen. He coughed again, the smell of cigarette smoke overwhelming him once more. He could practically see clouds of it hanging around the light fixtures. No one else seemed bothered by it, though. Everyone else was either on the phone or typing at their computer, and with about 30 desks in the room, almost all of them filled, the noise was constant. Not to mention the 2 mezzanine levels that wrapped around the edges of the room with more offices beyond them. The walkways were all lined with wooden banisters, and Kim was sure they had looked nice when the police station had first opened and the new wood had been polished. But now they had gums stuck to them, and some of the spindles looked like they might fall to the ground floor. In fact, the whole room was in a similar state of disrepair. The wooden floorboards were wearing out in some places, and with the little lights that windows were letting into the room, it was clear they hadn't been cleaned in a while. Kim wasn't here to repair a police station, though. He made his way across the bullpen, weaving in and out between people's desks, hearing snippets of conversations about murders and drug mules and armed robbery. What had happened to this city? Kim finally made it to the other side of the large bullpen, advanced up the small set of creaking stairs that led to the first mezzanine level, and knocked on Rain Compre's door. The man inside looked up from his desk, and from the window pane in the door, he saw Kim and waved him inside. "Good morning, sir," Kim said as he entered the room, shutting the door behind him, and the tension he didn't realise he'd been holding in his shoulders released. Chief Rain Compre's office, while a little messy, was a haven compared to the chaos of the bullpen. "Kim," he said with a smile. He looked a lot older than the last time Kim had seen him, but it was no surprise. Being the chief of police of a city like this would take its toll on anyone. "I know this is a little forward, sir, but there's a woman out in the waiting room. Her daughter is missing and a D.I. Dubois hasn't updated her." Roger sighed and typed on the computer he was sitting at, and then hit enter. "Dubois is a waste of space. I've transferred the case to someone else." Kim smiled. He was helping already. "I saw Sabrina outside too. She asked me to bring you your lunch." He held out the box and Roger took it. "She shouldn't have. We won't be back for lunch." Kim raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" Ray Compre opened the first drawer of his desk and took out a police badge, along with a handgun. "These are yours. We'll update your ID badge later so you can access the cells in the basement." "Where are we going?" Kim asked as he tucked the gun into the leather holster he was wearing over his shirt and under his blazer. "Swan Island. Our bodies washed up." Kim tried not to grimace as he grabbed his police badge. That was, sadly, nothing new in Paris. And by this point, Kim and everyone else in the city had become used to it. But they shouldn't have had to. His memories from the Akuma drug attacks, when he'd been in high school, were still fresh in his head, as if they had happened yesterday. He still got nightmares sometimes. "Oh, Kim!" He clapped a hand to his mouth, hoping Rose wouldn't be able to hear him breathing from inside the locker. He wasn't sure which one he'd climbed into. Maybe Mark's? It didn't matter. All that mattered was that Rose couldn't find him. He wasn't sure what had happened. He had left school to meet one of his dads for lunch, and when he got back, the whole courtyard had been deserted. He knew he wasn't late back. He could be a little dense at times, but he was never late. That was Marinette's thing. He took his phone out and checked the time. Class didn't start for another 10 minutes, but there should be people around. So where was everyone? "Hi, Kim." He looked up and smiled when he saw Rose was upstairs, stood on the walkway outside of Miss Boustier's classroom. "Oh, Rose! Where is everyone?" She smiled. "I don't know." As she spoke, though, blood trickled out of the corner of her mouth. "Rose?" Kim knew she had been ill when she was a child. Was this it? Was she getting sick again? More blood dripped out of her mouth, falling onto her pink dress. But she didn't bother to wipe it away, and now Kim saw that the top half of the dress was soaked in blood. Whatever was going on, it had been going on for a while, probably since he'd left at the start of lunch. She smiled at him, and even from downstairs, he could see the way blood had caked into the crevice between each tooth. But she didn't seem to care. It was like she was enjoying this. Rose, did you get injected with Akuma? She let out a little giggle, and with it, some of her breath came out of her mouth. Kim shouldn't have been able to see it, but he could, and it was green. What had Hawkmoth done to Rose? It feels so good, Kim. I'm sure if you asked, he would give it to you too. We could find him. Together. Kim shook his head. Rose, we need to get you to the hospital. She shook her head, more green vapour escaping her mouth, and she headed towards the stairs. But I like this. Join me, Kim. He ran then, straight into the locker room, and then berated himself. There'd been enough time for him to run back the way he'd come, out of the school and onto the metro, but he could hear Rose running down the metal steps in the courtyard, and even though he was faster than her and probably still could make it out of the locker room, he didn't want to chance it, not when she was... well, he didn't know what was happening to her exactly. The Akuma drug affected everyone differently, altering their body biologically in some way, but it also sent them insane too. This Rose wasn't in her right mind. Kim had to remember that. But even so, he didn't want to get anywhere near what she was breathing out. He dropped his bag and darted for the lockers, hiding inside one and shutting the door from the inside just as Rose came into the room. Kim was too tall and broad, even for an 18-year-old, and couldn't fit in here properly, but he forced himself inside. His neck hurt from staying in this position, but apart from the hand over his mouth, he couldn't move. Any more movement would surely alert Rose to his position. "Please, Kim," she said, but he could hear her walking up and down by the lockers. "Everyone left me. But I know you won't. You're so kind to me." She kept wondering, but she eventually returned to the door. Kim listened as it opened and closed, and then he removed his hand and finally allowed himself to breathe. He couldn't live in Paris when it was like this for much longer. The door to the locker he was in was suddenly pulled open, and Rose was stood there, grinning, but the sight of her horrified Kim. The blood coated all of her teeth, and it dripped down her chin, and she had a manic look in her eyes that all Akuma victims shared. This wasn't the Rose he had grown up with. "Please," Kim begged, holding his hands up, but it was no use. Rose leant forward and let out her breath, the noxious green cloud engulfing Kim's face, and then he was coughing and coughing and coughing, until he had fallen forwards, kneeling on the floor of the locker room, spitting bright red blood onto the floor. And not just a little. It was a lot. It was too much. He needed to stop, but he couldn't. That gas, whatever it was doing this to him. He had no control over it. Rose screamed then, and although still coughing, Kim looked up and saw Ladybug and Cat Noir. They were in their normal outfits. Him all in black, her red with spots, both with matching gold accents, and now also with matching masks over their noses and mouths. Ladybug lifted an unconscious Rose into her arms and marched right out of the locker room with her, and now Kim saw Rena Rouge was holding the door open. Her appearance was unchanged. The mask to conceal her identity covered the lower half of her face. Cat Noir knelt beside him. "Can you stand?" he asked, voice muffled behind the mask. Kim tried to move, but he started coughing again, more of his blood landing on the floor. "Rena, can you get Carapace?" he asked, and a moment later, the final superhero was in the room, this one decked out in green, and Cat Noir and Carapace hoisted Kim up together and carried him outside of the school to where an ambulance was already waiting. "I'm sorry," Kim managed to say in between coughs, his voice gone hoarse. "It's okay," Cat Noir said. "You helped us to save her. So thank you." The two of them sat him down in the back of the ambulance, and Kim watched the group of 4 heroes for a moment. Judging from their appearance, they couldn't have been much older than he, but they were doing so much for the city. He wanted to help too. The memory replayed itself in Kim's mind as Roger drove them through Paris to the 15th arrondissement. The Akuma drug had targeted Rose's lungs, creating a poisonous green gas that gave internal bleeding to the ones who inhaled it, including Rose. The doctors had been able to stop Kim from coughing up his insides fairly quickly once they'd arrived at the hospital, but with Rose it had been different. Akuma was still active, so the fumes were still being created inside her, causing more and more damage the longer it had stayed. He was fine now, and Rose was... she was alive, but the damage Akuma had done to her lungs had been permanent. She had to carry an oxygen tank around with her just so she could breathe properly. What Gabriel Agreste had done to her was disgusting, and to others. It was all awful. He still remembered the day Nino's brother, Chris, had been found beneath the Eiffel Tower. Kim had thrown up when he'd seen the pictures. Kim was 21 now, but he still lived in Paris. And even though no one had been injected with Akuma for 3 years, the memories of it all were still clear to him, as well as the memories of the ones who had been saving their city, who were still trying to save their city. Cat Noir might have left, but Ladybug, Rena Rouge and Carapace remained, and if Kim couldn't become the athlete that he dreamed of being, he'd try his best as a police officer to try and save the city he called home. Rain-Compris turned the car onto Pont de Grenelle, and once halfway down the bridge, he pulled up at the side, and together they walked towards the steps that led down to Swan Island. It was usually a busy area, despite all of the crime now in the city, but the access steps had been taped off, and a police sergeant was standing guarding the entrance so no one would disturb the body. Rain-Compris flashed his badge, as did Kim, and the tape was unfastened to let them pass, and they descended the steps together. It had been a long time since Kim had been here. The last time had probably been back in high school, for their graduation picnic, mere days before everyone found out Adrian's dad had been the one administering Akuma. It sometimes seemed like it would have been better if they had never known. They walked across the artificial island, down the path and through the trees, to where a forensic tent had been set up at the edge of the bank. The body would be inside there, to conceal it from public view. "You ever seen a dead body?" Rain-Compris asked. "Yes," Kim said. "Living in Paris wasn't for the faint-hearted." "Then hopefully this won't be too bad for you. 2 weeks ago we had this rookie from Amiens and he almost threw up all over the crime scene." They arrived at the tent and Rain-Compris pulled back the white plastic, allowing them both to enter, and the forensic examiner was knelt down with a camera, taking photos. "What do we have, Benoit?" Rain-Compris asked, and the examiner stood up, but whatever they said faded into the background when Kim saw the body. It was soaked, the clothes on the person having changed colour, but even so, Kim still recognised them. "Claudie," he whispered, tears coming to his eyes, and Chief Rain-Compris, along with the forensic examiner, turned to him. "You know this person?" Benoit asked. Claudie Conte." Chief Rain-Compris' composure melted away. All the parents of DuPont had been friends. Kim didn't know if Roger and Claudie were still close, but they once had been. "Did she drown?" Kim asked. He hoped she hadn't. He couldn't imagine how scared she would have been. Benoit shook his head. "Bullet wound to the head," he said, and now Kim had stared longer at the body, he saw the entry point too. The only reason he hadn't before because the water had washed away all the blood. Whoever it was would have dropped her body in the Seine to dispose of her. Kim turned away at that. Someone had disposed of the incredible woman he hoped would one day become his mother-in-law. This city made him feel sick. "I need to tell Max," Kim said. "Her son?" Rain-Compris said. "Yes, he's my boyfriend. I have to go. I'll come with you." They left the way they came, but instead of Max's head being filled with memories of Akuma, now they were full of memories of Claudie. She was so amazing and talented and intelligent, and Max. How was he going to take the news? Kim knew his boyfriend was brilliant and never complained about the workload he had, but it obviously got to him, if this morning had been any indication. Kim truly didn't know how Max would handle this. And, oh God, the gala was tonight. They'd have to cancel. There was no way it could go ahead. It didn't take them long before they arrived at Montparnasse Tower, Ada's headquarters, and the staff were already coordinating the food and drink deliveries for later tonight. The main receptionist was on the phone, but once she saw Kim, she immediately waved him through without having to show her his police badge. He visited enough times for all the staff to know he was the COO's boyfriend, but today's visit would be nothing like the others. "What do I say?" Kim asked when he and Rain-Compris were standing in the elevator together. The older man sighed. "It's never easy. Just tell the truth. But we don't know who killed her yet, or why, but we will. For now, just tell him what we know." Kim nodded. "A bullet to the head." "She wouldn't have been in pain?" "None at all." There was nothing good about this, but that was the only thing that could be interpreted as a silver lining in this situation. The lift dinged when it reached the 55th floor, and the doors opened out to another receptionist sitting at a desk. There were typically only 3 people on this floor: the receptionist, Max, and Claudie. Max, the chief operating officer, took half of the floor, and Claudie, the chief executive officer of Ada, took the other half, both with sprawling offices with their own conference tables inside. What would happen to Claudie's side now? The receptionist smiled when she saw Kim, but it quickly faded when she saw Rain-Compris at his side. Everyone in Paris knew who he was. He was on the news almost every day addressing the rising crime statistics. Not that it helped any. "Is everything okay?" the receptionist asked. "We need to see Max." "Now," Kim said. His online meeting was supposed to have finished, 5 minutes ago. You can go straight in." "Thank you." Kim led Raincomprey to the left, the side that belonged to Max, and knocked on the door. "Come in," he heard Max call, and Kim opened the door to the familiar office. Max was sat behind his desk opposite the door, and his office was similar to their apartment. Dark decorations, but well lit to offset it. Old Ada product prototypes were mounted on the walls, including their old collaborations with Tsurugi Industries, as well as the Design Innovation Awards they'd won. The black conference table was all the way over to the left of the room, looking out towards the Eiffel Tower, and to the right were the plush purple settees where Kim and Max would eat lunch together. But now Kim was about to ruin any happy memories they made in this office with what he was about to tell his boyfriend. At the sound of the door closing behind them, Markov chirped from where he was hovering at Max's shoulder. "Kim! Chief Raincomprey!" At the sound of their names, Max looked away from his computer. "Is everything okay?" he asked as he stood up. "I'm fine," Kim said, "but I do have to tell you something." He looked over at Raincomprey, and he took a step towards the door. "I'll wait out in the hall," the chief said, and Markov flew after him. "Chief Raincomprey, you have gained 20 pounds since the last time I saw you," Markov chimed. "You are extremely rude," Raincomprey said as he shut the door, leaving just Max and Kim in the office. And now it was just the two of them. The silence of the room was too loud for Kim. How was he supposed to tell Max something like this? "What is wrong?" Max said, coming to stand in front of him. "You are crying." Kim sniffed, not realising tears had begun to fall, and quickly wiped them away. "Sorry. Max. It's your mum. I'm so sorry, baby. She's dead. She's been murdered. She was shot in the head and then someone put her in the Seine, her body washed up on Swan Island." Max stared at Kim for a moment, took off his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose, and then put them back on. "I see. Do you need a hug?" Max shook his head and went to sit back down at his desk. "No, I'm fine." "Max, your mum's just died." He nodded and started typing again, carrying on with whatever work he'd been doing. "You're going to have to cancel the gala," Kim said, and Max almost glared at him from over the top of the monitor. "The gala goes ahead." "You can't be serious. It's a party." "My mum loved the gala. She wouldn't want us to cancel it." Kim just stared at his boyfriend. He truly didn't know what else to say. His behaviour this morning had been odd, but this? Refusing to cancel the gala? Already talking about his mum in the past tense? What on earth was going on? "Was there anything else?" Max asked. "No." "I'll see you after work then." Kim stood there for a moment longer before he turned and left, shutting the door to the office behind him and leaning against it. Max loved his mum. Kim knew that. He loved her with everything in him. So why did he react like that? It didn't make any sense. Kim didn't want to doubt his boyfriend. Max had done so much for him, especially after his injury. But there was definitely more going on here. Oh, Kim! Oh, I don't make myself laugh. Let's try that one again.